Hello, 6th graders. Welcome to Chapter 2. In this video, we will look at lessons 2.1 and 2.2, which is changing fractions to decimals and decimals to fraction. And lesson 2.2 is then comparing those decimals and fractions and ordering them from least to greatest or greatest to least. Let's get started. For number 1, we're going to be changing this decimal to a fraction. And I've written it in standard form and word form, and now we just need to write it as a fraction. So when you read that number 5/10 as a fraction, we also read that as 5/10. So 5/10 as a decimal, 5/10 as a fraction, and you make sure you always reduce to simplest form, which is the same as 1/2. Now moving on to number 2, I have 555 10,000ths, making sure my THS is being heard in there. So I need to write that as a fraction, 555 10,000ths, and then putting that in simplest form as well. I can divide both the numerator and denominator by 5 and get 111 over 2,000, and then dividing those numerators and denominators by 10 and getting 11 over 200. That is then in simplest form. Alright, number 3 is when we have a decimal that's greater than 1 whole, $1.25, or 1 25/100ths. So this one looks like a mixed number, 1 whole and 25/100ths. Again, making sure that I simplify it and put it in simplest form. 1 and 1/4. And number 4, my whole number is 5, so it goes outside the fraction, and 75/100ths. So 75 is my numerator and 100 is my denominator. And that simplifies to 3/4. 75 cents is 3/4 of a dollar. Now I'm going to show you how you change a fraction or mixed number into a decimal. So we have 6 3/8. So what you need to do is you need to kind of ignore this 6 for right now, because that can simply just be put in front of the decimal because that's our whole number. So we can just fill that in right now and kind of ignore it. And let's focus on the 3/8. So the fraction bar is really a division sign. So 3/8 can also be read as 3 divided by 8. So you know how to do that. 3 divided by 8, add a decimal and a 0, and then start dividing. That is 3, 24, 6, bring down another 0, oops, forgot to bring up my decimal, and let's see, that is 7, 8 times 7 is 56, another 0, 40, and maybe 5. Alright, so that worked out nicely. So 3/8 is the same as 0.375. So again, I have the 6 from my mixed number as my whole number represented here. And then I just put 375 behind the decimal. So these are equivalent. 7/8, same deal. 7 divided by 8. So 7 divided by 8. Add your decimal and your 0, and then start dividing. Nope, that's 8. 64. Jumping ahead just to save some time. And we get 5. Squeeze that in, and 0. So 7/8 is the same as 0.875, or 875 thousandths. Same thing. one more example that I want to squeeze in, when you have a fraction that is a factor of 10 or 100. So when you're looking at something like half, right? If you think about money, you think about it as 50 cents. Or if you think about, let's see, 2/5, well, that's the same as 4/10, which would be 0.4, and so on and so forth. So those are a little bit simpler to work with, but really you're going to use division when you don't have something that converts nicely into a 10 or a 100 or a 20. Okay? And for these, when you're doing your division, I would suggest that once you get past the thousands place, you can stop. There's no need to keep dividing and dividing until you've used the whole paper. You either run into reoccurring digits that will repeat itself, or it'll just keep going on forever, and it's not necessary to do all of that. So I'm telling you to just stop once you get to the thousands place. Alright, ready for 2.2, which is comparing fractions and decimals. So here we have 4 values that we need to compare and put them in order from least to greatest. Alright, so we've got some mixture of decimals and fractions. I think the simplest way for me, I feel most comfortable, is changing a fraction to a decimal. That way I'm guaranteed to make sure that they're accurate and spot on, whether they're 1 digit or 2 digits or 3 digits behind the decimal. So I've got 3/10 and 1/4 I need to change into a decimal. So 3/10 changed to a decimal is 0.3, and 1/4, I know that 1/4 would be this, or 1/4 would be 25 cents. So now taking that information and then ordering them from least to greatest in their original form. So 1/4, 3/10, and then we've got 0 and 45 hundredths and 0 and 95 hundredths. Ordered from least to greatest. Again, changing my fractions to decimals, I like doing that more, so I'm going to do it that way. And I would strongly suggest you do the same. Let's do one more example when we have fractions. You've heard of smaller the denominator, bigger the pieces, things like that. Just for practicing and using this lesson, we're going to change them all into decimals and then arrange them. And before I even do that, I know that half is already the greatest fraction here, because 2/5 is less than half and 7/15 is less than half. So for saving my brain sakes, I'm going to just fill in 1/2 as being the greatest, and then focus on those last 2 fractions to just figure out which one's greater than the other. So 2/5 would be the same as 4/10, which is 0.4, and then for that next one I'm going to do 7 divided by 15, do some long division. That's 4/60, and that's 10, bring down another 0. That is 6 and 90. Oops, sorry, ran out of space. I'll get 10. I'll bring down another 0. This is getting messy. And I'll get another 6 up here. And I'll keep getting 90, and so on and so forth. So this is when that repeating decimal comes into place. But now that I have at least numbers going into the hundredths, I can compare the 4/10 to the answer that I got when dividing 7 by 15. So I know that 2/5 is less, and that 7/15 is greater. So I can arrange them like so. Alright, and here is your video. There are no practice problems, so please review this, and if you have questions, please ask me tomorrow. Alright, enjoy the rest of your day.